There is a reason the first time you load up Chivalry 2, the developers start you on the Officer subclass of the Knight, as it's one of the strongest and most well-rounded classes in the game. Personally, I consider it to be the top class, and I've spent many hours slaughtering servers on it. I'm Strider the Champ, and this is my ultimate guide on the Officer subclass. We'll be discussing things like class strengths and weaknesses, combat strategies, best weapons, and best weapon combinations. If you enjoy the guide, be sure to join the ranks of angels with a subscription. Now, the Knight was considered the tank of the medieval battlefield, and this holds true in Chivalry, as the Knight class has the highest health pool at 175, making it the class with the highest survivability. Extra health means mistakes are less punishing and can allow you to stay in the fight without healing or going to the resupply station for a longer period of time. Perhaps the greatest aspect of the officer's tankiness is the fact that they are more resilient to those pesky beta male archers. Nothing is more annoying than being killed by an arrow during an intense battle or killing spree, and the knight is much less vulnerable to arrows than, say, the vanguard or footman. Now, on the topic of health pools, we do have to mention that blunt weapons like a heavy mace do a whopping 50% bonus damage to knights. These weapons are a hard counter to the knight class and makes them no more tanky than, say, a vanguard class, but blunt weapons are definitely used less often in team objective, as players tend to favor axes and messers. Now, the officer class does come with some drawbacks. Heavy armor comes with a cost, and the officer only has a movement speed of 80. Movement speed has a large impact on being able to close the distance on enemies to land strikes, and the officer is less forgiving than a fast-moving class like, say, the vanguard. The officer also has 80 stamina, which is one of the lower stamina pools of the melee classes. Combine the low stamina, low movement speed, and a negative 50% debuff to dash, and the knight has to alter defensive strategies slightly from other classes. Being able to leap or dodge out of the way of strikes is great, and it can really save your ass in combat. However, having the ability to do this less often means the dash should be used as a last resort when using the knight class. Defensively, the knight wants to combine effective movement and footwork along with the most important defensive move, the counter, as their main form of defense. Countering enemy attacks is so vital in the knight class because it's the only way to regen stamina during combat, and it's a necessary skill to learn when playing the knight if you plan on chaining multiple kills together with no rest period. Now, before we go into weapon choices, I do want to mention that the officer has access to the best special ability in the game, the Warhorn. With the press of a button, an officer can provide health to himself and surrounding allies. An effective Warhorn use can change the flow of an entire team battle, and it'll score you a lot of points to help you rise up to the top of the scoreboard. Warhorns are just essential on like those bridge fights where it's just a clusterfuck of people swinging everywhere and damage being done by enemies and teammates alike. The team who gets off a few heals to replenish their troops generally wins the fight. Now, the officer class has access to an amazing group of primary weapons: the longsword, heavy mace, war axe, and poleaxe. All of these weapons are extremely viable in team objective play. I've been a long-time supporter of the longsword and consider it to be the best weapon in the game. I do even have a guide for the longsword on my channel. Be sure to check that out. Now, my personal tier list of weapons for the officer would go longsword, poleaxe, heavy mace, war axe. And I do want to note that this is a personal list, and sometimes people think I'm a bit crazy that I consider the poleaxe one of the best weapons in the game. There's a very high skill gap with this weapon. It's only effective if you primarily can hit stabs and overheads and manage distance. A lot of the player base plays in third person. I don't, so it's a little bit harder for them to hit these shots and manage distance than it is for me, but the poleaxe is freaking awesome. Try it. If you're more of a swing and hope for the best player, it will be trash, and I would definitely recommend going with something like the War Axe instead. Now, for secondaries, there are two highly viable weapons in the sword and the mace. The sword is one of the strongest 1v1 weapons in the game, so feel free to toss your primary weapon when you see a kill opportunity. Having a secondary weapon that's so powerful can really save your ass when you goof and are disarmed. Sometimes when you lose your primary weapon, your opponents are so used to the slow two-handed weapon speed that you can catch them with a few free shots with the quicker one-handed sword. Now, the mace is also a really nice weapon, and it gives you that juicy 50% bonus damage to enemy knights. It's also very quick, and opponents tend to struggle with the speed of these one-handed secondary weapons. Now, the third one-handed weapon, the axe, I don't think offers or does anything that these other weapons don't do better, so I would just shelf it until it sees some adjustments. Now, if you want to get really sweaty, we can talk about weapon pairings. If you run a non-bonus damage weapon like the longsword, it pairs really nicely with the mace. If you see an enemy knight isolated, you can quickly swap to the mace for some bonus damage. The opposite holds true if you're running a heavy mace. Having the sword as your secondary allows you to swap quickly to deal with the always popular Vanguard class. Now, I hope this guide was helpful in choosing how to play the Knight Officer class. Subscribe to the channel and then head on over to Twitch to see live officer gameplay. Champ out.